Welcome to Catholic Answers Live, the program where you participate with your questions about apologetics and evangelization, including the most important theological, spiritual, moral, and social issues facing the world today. We're not taking live calls. However, we invite you to stay with us and enjoy the broadcast. Now, from San Diego, Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome to a second hour of Catholic Answers Live. I'm Trent Horn, apologist and speaker here at Catholic Answers, filling in as your guest host today. Today's a special episode of Catholic Answers Live, celebrating All Saints' Day, and all of our questions are from our saints and saints in the making on Facebook and social media. You submitted some great questions, and we have a great guest to answer them. He is the Director of Apologetics and Evangelization here at Catholic Answers. He is the one and only Tim Staples. Tim, welcome back.
Hey, it is good to be back, and I have to say thank you for saving me from Third Nicaea.
Right. In the previous hour, we were talking about some of the ecumenical councils and the monothelite heresy, which was settled and stamped out at Third Constantinople, but those councils start to blend together.
Especially,
it's funny.
You know what, Trent, especially when you realize you have 45 seconds left and the clock is ticking. And
right.
I said Third Nicaea instead of Third Constantinople, but thank goodness you caught it.
It's funny, actually. I'm glad you brought that up, Tim, because it's something I wanted to speak about briefly. We were talking about the monothelite heresy, and some people may think, well, how does this really fit into today? Wasn't this all settled in the 8th century? But actually, there's still disputes about this today.
Sure.
The Protestant philosopher William Lane Craig, for example, someone I enjoy reading on natural theology and arguments for God and the resurrection, he has come out as a monothelite. He believes philosophically Christ can only have one will.
Yes.
And so he's defended that on his website and in his books. And it's so funny. Here's an excerpt I have from him from what he said in his online answer to people who said, well, Bill, you're a heretic. And it's really interesting. I want your comment. He writes, no earnest Christian wants to be considered a heretic. But we Protestants recognize Scripture alone as our ultimate rule of faith. Therefore, we bring even the statements of ecumenical councils before the bar of Scripture.
Yes. Isn't that something? And you and I look at this and we say, my gosh, how could Jesus be any more plain, in Mark chapter 14, verse 36, when he says, not my will, but your will be done, right? Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass. Nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done. But see, I think, Trent, this is a classic example of why Jesus did not give us a book. He gave us a church, and the church would write, preserve, canonize sacred scripture. Jesus was too smart to build his church upon a book that for 2,000 years would be the subject to thousands of different interpretations, because even though, Trent, and we could talk about much more than just the two wills in Christ. I mean, virtually everything we believe and many things that are plainly spelled out are contradicted in various Protestant communities. And, so I don't fault William Lane Craig in that. Because, look, if I didn't have the magisterium of the church, Trent, I'd be saying a lot more crazy things than what William Lane Craig said. And I did when I was Protestant. I mean, I used to believe that Jesus Christ was not the eternal Son. He was the eternal Word.
There's several Protestants who still believe that.
Oh, absolutely. Our friend Eric Svensson, the Protestant apologist, denies that Jesus was the eternal Son. But falling in line with Dr. Walter Martin and his famous book, The Kingdom of the Cults, which was and is considered to be a classic. In the 1977 edition, he says, not only is Christ not the eternal Son, but the Father is not the eternal Father. Because he says both sonship and fatherhood pertain to time and can therefore only pertain to humanity. So there is no eternal Father, no eternal Son. We could talk about more. I mean, William Lane Craig also denies the absolute simplicity of God, which is a philosophical concept that's knowable through the pure light of natural reason. But, of course, he rejects that as well. And so he's a heretic on more than one point. But he makes if you're Protestant, the definitive case, you have to acknowledge, look, I don't follow some ecumenical council.
Right.
Everything has to be submitted to Scripture, which ultimately, Trent, is not really submitting everything to Scripture. It's submitting everything to his intellect.
Right. Well, it's funny. I've seen Protestant apologists when they engage Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons, and when the Jehovah's Witness, for example, just won't accept the view, an interpretation of Scripture as showing the deity of Christ. I see many of them in debates or articles saying, but this is how it's always been interpreted, and what about the Council of Nicaea? And so it's interesting that they want the authority from these councils, but Sola Scriptura cannot give them that. It's just like a helpful suggestion. It has no authority at all, and as you've shown, the problems just tumble right out of that.
Yes, they do. The perennial problem, my friend. And for those of you listening, and maybe you're Protestant, maybe you're on the fence, let me tell you, when you come into the Catholic Church, there is a liberty, there is a liberation that happens. I know it did with me, Trent. You can relate to this as well, to where I finally realized, oh my word, everything doesn't depend on me. My intellect, I've got to go back and read Calvin and read Luther and read Knox and read Wesley and read Finney and read whoever else and decide, and Thomas Aquinas and Augustine, and say, well, Augustine's good here, but man, he's wrong here. Luther's good here, but man, he's wrong here. Ultimately, I was the guy in the driver's seat, and let me tell you, I'm not that smart, and neither are any of you listening, my friends. Jesus did not build his church upon a book, and he certainly didn't build it upon our individual intellects. He built it upon Peter with his own authority, Jesus' authority that he communicated to Peter and all the apostles in union with him, so that we could have the certainty of faith, so that we would not be, as Ephesians 4:14 says, children tossed to and fro within every wind of doctrine, but we would have ministers in the church who could speak with the authority of Jesus Christ.